All of us know you as a friend or a neighbor, a father, a grandfather, a businessman, a little league coach, a small town council member, or a state rep. What has changed in your personal life since you've been elected to one of the highest elected offices in the state?
Well, honestly, at the personal level, not a whole lot's changed. You know, I think back to the first time I met Jeff Tarte. It was on a ball field in Cornelius when he was training other coaches to coach baseball at the time. And since then, I've done baseball, softball, but not a whole lot's changed. I still drive a pickup truck, and I still like my private time. I think I'm a friendly person, but I'm not a very social person. I spend most of my time. I spend most of my time with my family or in the woods or by myself, and that's even more precious now because it's all the time that you have to spend in Washington and out and about. But yeah, I don't think, Jeff, like I've said, Jeff and I have known each other since 1998, and Bill and I have known each other since probably right around 2000, 2001. I don't think I've changed a whole lot. Maybe I've gotten older, lost a little hair, but pretty much steady state.
So then let me ask this question. Since you first elected to office and now you've been in the office about 6 years, what has changed being a senator from the first year that you got there till now? What's changed in that regard?
Well, I think, Joe, it's just how much you learn when you travel across the world. You meet with state leaders. You go to places like Afghanistan and Iraq, and traveled all. I have to sit down and think about all the places that I've been. Your whole view of the issues, the potential, the things that are not obvious in terms of policy choices that become very obvious when you get the briefings that I do, and the breadth of information, the depth of information you have, and it forces you to learn a lot. And I was just on a call the other day with some orthodontists, and a few years ago, I would not been able to draw a parallel between some of the challenges they're going through right now and what some of the challenges pork processors are going through right now. But now I can. You just have a very different grasp of the issues because it's part of your job.
Right. So here's a question I've got for you. This is Professor Gordon of High Point University. He teaches American politics. You can imagine my son does go there, which is why I bring up the question. Professor Gordon asked this question: what are some of the committees you would like to serve and best fit your expertise?
Well, I tell you, when I remember vividly, it was 2 weeks after we won in 2014, Mitch McConnell called me up, and he said, Tom, I noticed normally we ask members to request 5 or 6 committees, and then, we generally get you on 2 or 3 of the ones you prefer, and you only ask for 2 committees. I asked for Senate Armed Services and Veterans. He said, I was kind of curious why you did that. I said, because, Mitch, if I can't be on those 2 committees, I won't serve on any in the first Congress, and then I'll just work, off those committees on those issues because they're very important to North Carolina, important to me. He says, well, you're on those committees, but I'd like you to consider a few others. And I had also put down as a third choice agriculture because no North Carolina member had been on ag since Jesse Helms, and I wanted to make sure that my farmers knew they were important to me. He said, you got those 3 committees, but I'd like you to consider a couple other ones. He said, one is aging. I said, well, I'm okay with that. I'm getting old. I'd like to take care of aging. And he said, and also judiciary. And so, well, Mitch, I'm not an attorney. I served on the Judiciary Committee when I was in the legislature, but, I'm more of a business person. I don't know if that's a good fit for me. He said, that's why I want you on it. We have to have a good mix. And I remember saying, okay, yeah, sure. How hard could that be? And now 2 Supreme Court justices later and a few other issues in judiciary. It's actually one of my favorite committees.
Senator, you just stepped right into my next question. And Professor Gordon of High Point University, teaching American politics, asked me to ask you this question. He said that he noticed that you voted against a closure requirements for a Supreme Court nominee, which suggested that you wanted the rule to stay the same, and he assumed that you wanted the majority to stay at 51. So he's asking the question, what do you think the future of the filibuster is, and would you get rid of it entirely?
I would never. I have said, and I know this angers a lot of people on my side of the aisle, but I have said that the day Republicans vote to remove the legislative filibuster is the day I leave the U.S. Senate. The legislative, there are two different calendars in the Senate. There's the executive calendar, which is where the Supreme Court justices and the nominations go, and then there's the legislative calendar. We have traditionally always honored the majority rule on nominations. So Harry Reid did the nuclear option to do all the Supreme Court justices. We just finished what Harry Reid started. But the fact of the matter is, even for Supreme Court justices, there have been only a handful of instances where the filibuster was ever used. It wasn't actually even used with Clarence Thomas. On the legislative side, if you remove that 60 vote threshold, then we are going to destroy the unique nature of the Senate and unlike virtually any other country in the world. One of the reasons why it's so important to keep that 60 vote threshold is so that you can't have massive swings in policy every 2 to 4 years. Think about that if you're a business and you're thinking about investing in the United States or some other country. Our country has a history of not having huge swings in terms of economic or tax policy. There have only been 3 times when the Democrats had a supermajority and arguably bad things happened. And it was Obamacare, it was the New Deal, and it was actually the Great Society. It's right. not necessarily that those that good didn't occur as a result of that, but a lot of bad occurred, a lot of things that we're still dealing with. Right. I think when we're forced to compromise and forced to work together, we do a better job. If we did the legislative filibuster, I think we would live to regret it.
Okay. Bill, you got a question?
Yeah, Tom, yesterday we had a Zoom call of our business owners, many of whom have been successful with the PPP, some who weren't. The ones that were successful are usually working with our community banks. Here in our area, Aquesta, First National, Blue Harbor doing a great job. Some of the larger banks, not so much. What are we going to be able to do with this 4th round that President Trump is expected to sign today? How is it going to be different for these business owners?
Well, Bill, I think what we're looking at, I think a lot of people may be expecting that we're going to have another $2 trillion package. I don't believe that's the case. I think what we're talking about doing is going into the CARES Act, the so-called Phase 3 bill, and tailoring it. We've got some challenges with universities. The limits on the number of employees becomes problematic when you take a look at some of the details, particularly in universities. We've got some nonprofits that were excluded. I think we need to go back and figure out how to cast a wider net with the programs that we put into place with the CARES Act, but not a whole new set of programs. The thing that we have to do also is make sure that the $2.2 trillion, the largest economic package ever passed by Congress, is fully utilized. We're working on getting the individual assistance out, and we're working on getting, now that we've put another $300 billion into the appropriations for the PPP program. I think we need to work on getting all that liquidity out there, helping businesses, stabilize businesses while we reopen business, and then around the edges, fix some of the things that are the shortcomings of the CARES Act.
And Jeff, I think you had a question about that, didn't you?
As Senator Tillis, I don't know if you saw yesterday that Governor Cooper extended the stay-at-home order till May 8th. And just since you're serving on that task force for the president, what's the thought on the Hill around reopenings and coordinating between D.C. and the states? How do we get our businesses back to work?
I think the governor is right that we need to be absolutely certain. The governor basically proposed something that is consistent with the COVID task force and the presidential guidelines. Make sure that you are containing the virus, make sure that you're at the peak of the curve, and then start opening businesses in a systematic way. I think the way that looks in North Carolina is right now, while we're tracking the incidence of the virus, I do teletown halls every day. I'm doing my 26th one today. I've had over almost 270,000 people participate in the calls over the last month. And what I'm trying to say is, y'all help us get to reopenings by wearing face coverings and social distancing. What we need to do as state, local, and federal leaders is start looking at our states, identifying regions that had a relatively low occurrence to begin with, start opening up business. It doesn't have to be wide open for the whole state, but there are a number of counties that I think in the coming weeks we can start relieving some of the restrictions and getting certain industries back in business. We need to do that work now so that we can start opening business the first part of May.
Jeff, you got another question?
Yeah, Tom, one of the things you hear, and maybe it's a little bit on the social media, is that individual senators and the president by himself are making these decisions. Can you share a little insight to what information you're looking at, the president's looking at, who you guys are leaning into for guidance and advice as you make these decisions?
A couple of things. I had 3 conference calls last week with economic development organizations across the state. I've had several conference calls with different industry groups to get an idea of how their business has been affected and how they think they could reopen. So I'm taking the CDC data, the COVID task force data, the conference calls we've had with the president and the vice president, and then I'm trying to localize it by looking at the incidence rate on a county-by-county basis, taking a look at projects that are out there that I think we could restart safely, and trying to put together a plan. I'm going to be working with the legislative leaders, Speaker Moore and Senator Berger, to say let's start identifying the areas that we think are most likely to be the ones that we can open up first. And also, even within the areas where you have a higher occurrence of COVID, for example, I think being able to relax some of the restrictions on elective procedures in hospitals is something that we should look at, because I think that the healthcare profession is best prepared to implement the COVID guidelines. They have to make sure that they have sufficient capacity for any kind of surge that they would deal with. But I believe that there's a way to start even seeing additional economic activity in the more populous areas. We've just got to be very, very focused in how we do it. And I will tell you, there are some states that I think could potentially be getting out ahead of their blockers. And one of the concerns I have is that people say, well, Georgia's opening up barbershops, salons, bowling alleys, and theaters. Why don't we do that? I look at Georgia, a state that's also about 10 million. We're roughly the same size in population. Georgia has had 3 times the number of COVID cases and 4 times the number of deaths of North Carolina. And if my governor said we're going to go wide open real soon, I'd say I think you may want to stay within the lines of the COVID task force and not necessarily subject your citizens and your neighboring state to an additional spike in the virus. It doesn't mean that we don't want to get started, but we want to use the data to do it. We don't want to let politics and public pressure force us to a decision that we believe the best epidemiologists in the world, and they're Americans, are telling us to do it a different way. So we've got to strike that balance. I know a lot of people are frustrated, and most people haven't been affected by COVID personally. If you just look at the numbers, we're at about 7,500, approaching 8,000 cases in North Carolina. We want to be methodical because we don't want a second spike in this first wave of the virus.
Right. Bill, you got a question?
Yeah, Tom, since we're on health care, a recent bill introduced by you and endorsed by 22 other Republican senators would prohibit insurance companies from denying health care because of pre-existing conditions. This is a really important issue. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's an example of Obamacare in general was maybe well-intentioned, but just horribly executed. It caused all kinds of disruptions in our healthcare system. But one of the things that it did have, and there are two of the things that I think are very important, and they've just become an expectation for any healthcare policy moving forward, is pre-existing conditions. Being able to allow someone who has pre-existing condition to get healthcare coverage and coverage for that condition. The other one is for young adults under the age of 26 being on their parents' health care plan. The reason that I filed the PROTECT Act was to make sure, and it's virtually the wording in Obamacare, but if the courts ultimately set aside Obamacare, I want to make sure that we have that protection in place. That was the reason why I filed that bill, and that's why we continue to push on it. I hope that we get a vote on it before the end of this Congress. But I think it's very, very important to say, of course, you have people on the other side of the aisle saying Republicans want to deny people with pre-existing conditions insurance. There's nothing further from the truth. If that bill came to the floor, I would expect every single Republican to vote for it. We want to protect people who have pre-existing conditions, and we want young adults under the age of 26 to be able to be on their parents' health care plans. The insurance industry is prepared to deal with it. The Republicans are prepared to vote on it. We just need to get it passed.
Jeff, do you got a question?
Yeah, one thing, Tom. I know we have procurement rules both at the federal and state level, and I understand we're still a little bit struggling to provide PPE items, personal protection equipment. Any thoughts on how we can streamline that process, or your ideas around allowing our businesses to pivot from their core business to making masks, making protective covering, et cetera?
Ability to retool and manufacture things that we've never manufactured before. Textiles is one example. Medical devices is another one.
Ventilators.
I was telling the economics, so longer term, I think what we have to do is have some of that capacity come back to the United States. Some of the disruption is simply because of where, like China, we've relied on other countries to manufacture these things over time. I think in the short term, what we're trying to do is make sure that hospitals and first responder networks, that those supply chains get shored up just through the private sector. So do what we have to do to get the private sector to get it to the people, get it to the organizations that traditionally used it. And then for the federal government's part, what we're trying to do is just facilitate that with states. I don't think it's a good idea for it to be nationalized, because I think at the end of the day, it would not create more capacity. It would probably create more red tape. So that's we're doing, and I know you've personally worked on some of this, but what we're trying to do at the state level is when we hear of an organization that is falling short, we're doing all the blocking and tackling and getting equipment to them. I don't think we're far away. If we one role that the population has to play, I hate to sound like a broken record, is if people will wear facial covering, if people will do everything they can to reduce the spread, then the pressure on getting PPEs goes down. So while we're working on getting more out there, everybody in the state needs to work on reducing the spread so that the demand goes down. If we can get the demand to go down while the supply is going up, we'll solve the problem of having shortages before, I think, in a matter of weeks.
Well, and Tom, I just want you to know I'm doing my part. I made Bill go through a 5-point inspection before I let him in the building. Bill, you got a question?
Yeah, we're coming to the end of the program. And Tom, I know I've spoken to a number of 501c3s, charitable organizations, Carolina Raptor Center among them, that applied, and they did get their grant. So thank you for that. But if you have one message for the business owners, managers, and employees of Lake Norman businesses, what is it?
Well, number one, if any business in North Carolina is seeking support, either through the PPP, some of the other Small Business Administration emergency loan programs, they need to call my office. We can help them. I literally responded to an email while we were doing this program with somebody who I think we finally helped secure their loan. But we're doing a lot of casework for businesses. They should reach out to my office at tillis.senate.gov. I'm on the banking committee, so I have we've got great relationships with the SBA and the various financial regulators that are in the mix on the CARES Act, and we're processing a lot of casework, and we've had a lot of successes, and I want to help them, and we do that through the blocking and tackling on an individual basis. So if you got a business here in North Carolina and the Lake Norman region, and you need help, contact me, and we will help you.
Mr. Tillis, one more time, sir. Where should they go to contact you? Because that's big news for this show, my friend.
Yeah, it's Tillis, TILLIS.senate.gov.
Thank you.
And like I said, we've opened up a lot of cases, and my staff are working 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, and we'll do everything we can to help.
And if that's not evidence of why we need Senator Thom Tillis. Jeff, you got another question?
I was going to ask, in terms of the relief program, how soon do you think the SBA, because I know is it divided right now into the paycheck protection and the SBA loan? Or is it only one or the other?
Program that we've, in this last bill that the House has voted on, we voted on earlier this week, we put additional money into that emergency program. Incidentally, we put another $75 billion in for specific support for healthcare systems that's flowing into the state. But there are other programs. There's also the Main Street Lending Act that a lot of people haven't talked about. It's a part of Main Street Lending Program that is a part of the CARES Act, which is a whole an addition of the $2.2 trillion. There's additional money in there, individual assistance, paycheck protection, and Main Street Lending Act.
So with the president's signature, will those funds start flowing next week?
Over the weekend, to be honest with you. They're just like the First Act. A lot of the lending occurred over the weekend. The thing we're going to have to watch is whether or not this $300 billion also gets fully subscribed. We may have to come back and add some more. And then we'll be going back the first week of May. I'll be back up in Washington, and we'll start working on some of the tuning, the things that Bill Russell and I talked about.
So, Senator, I know you got to go. I got two quick questions for you. The first one is, what's your relationship with our current North Carolina governor and currently? And then what's it normally like for a senator, that relationship with a governor?
You know, I think it varies from state to state. I've had a generally good relationship with Governor Cooper. We disagree. There are certain policy matters that we disagree on. But I think when it comes to a crisis, the times that I've worked with him on hurricane response and the time that I'm working with him on the COVID response, that's where we check our red jersey and blue jersey at the door, and we're working together. And I think working with his administration, Mike Sprayberry, the Director of Emergency Management, I had him on one of my telephone town halls a couple of weeks ago. You know, we're in crisis mode right now, so I've got no patience for politics. This is about protecting people and getting our businesses back in order.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that goes me to my last question. Have you have you ever had a conversation with Nancy Pelosi, and did she offer you any of her gourmet ice cream?
You know, I was trying to figure out, number one, that refrigerator was pretty impressive. The picture of all the ice cream in there is the hell. I don't know if I could afford the ice cream, let alone the refrigerator.
Actually, it was my older brother that asked me to ask you that, and that's exactly what he said. Joe, I think the ice cream costs more than the freezer.
I was tallying that up. It's like $5 to $10 a pint, and there were a lot of pints in there.
I know you got to go. Let me give you the last minute, sir. Senator, please tell us and my listeners why we need to send you back to the North Carolina Senate.
If you're concerned with an independent judiciary and the Supreme Court, if you're concerned with government getting too big, if you're concerned with taxes being too high, that's why you've got to keep a majority in the U.S. Senate. Our race will be the most expensive race in this. There's already almost $60 million that's been committed to advertising in this state, specifically for the Senate race. This race is probably going to be about a $150 million race. The reason why the Democrats are focused on it is that they know that if North Carolina, if we lose the race in North Carolina, then Chuck Schumer will have the gavel. And I think that that would be devastating to this country for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to have control over the Congress. I think would be devastating. We have to remember the incredible economy we had back in February. That economy was a result of the tax cuts, the regulatory tailoring, the work that we were able to accomplish in cooperation with President Trump. All of that will be reversed if we lose the race in North Carolina, because if we lose in North Carolina, we will almost certainly lose the majority in the U.S. Senate. That's why I'm running again.
Mr. Senator Thom Tillis, thank you, sir, so much. We really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe and wear your facial covering.
You are listening to Local Biz Now. I am Joe Vagnone, and if it's Friday morning, your business matters.